Welcome to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. Jimmy is a veteran U.S. Navy SEAL, a former protective officer for the CIA Global Response Staff, founder and CEO of the Able Shepherd Program, a husband and father of four, and a personal friend of mine. Now here's Jimmy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Protector Culture Podcast with Jimmy Graham. I'm your host, Jimmy Graham. Joining me today for our special, what we're calling our virtual town hall, is James Cook. Thank you, brother, for being here again.
Thank you.
James is a criminal defense attorney out of Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. You also have an FFL, so you're not just an attorney on this. You have a business, Cook's Gun Repair and Customizing. Mm-hmm. You're also a program attorney for U.S. LawShield.
Yes.
You've been here before helping us out in that room right down the hall. We're here, recording from Centennial Gun Club in Centennial, Colorado, and you've been there for what we call our mix. So we have a gathering where we may have upwards 60, sometimes 80 people in a room. It's just an excuse for our community to get together. Usually there's food. It's either Chick-fil-A or it's pizza. And we could be talking about silencers and how they work. We could be talking about pretty much anything. And for that particular night, a lot of people had a lot of questions. If I remember correctly, we didn't even go and do our shooting thing, or maybe delayed it a lot because there was so much interaction. Because a lot of people just have a lot of questions. I think people that train and know a lot about this, they're typically not lawyers. Like, so I've got questions for you. I got a little some questions. What we did, and I appreciate you coming on short notice. Our last one was with Tyler and Josh. It was great having those guys back there in the Statesman talking to us and answering some questions about specifically U.S. LawShield. I'd like to open it up a little bit because we've gotten a lot of questions lately from our community. We opened it up recently and just said, hey, what are questions that you have? So we have some that I'm going to read and then we'll entertain, and then others that we'll get some folks on the phone and we'll just address their questions and we'll go from there.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm not sure what's going to come out, but we'll figure it out. So Between the two of us, we will get some kind of answer to them. Mine, right off the bat, was I wanted this more a personal thing. The Boogaloo Boys. You've heard of this?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me what that is as you understand it.
Well, as I understand it, they're on websites like Reddit and 4chan. Probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, there were a lot of memes going around about starting 1776 Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, and then that kind of got changed around a bit. And it seems like kind of an internet meme that some people are taking a little bit too seriously, and they're going out in Hawaiian shirts and body armor with AR-15s and going to these protests and kind of interjecting themselves in the middle of it. It can be problematic because you got a guy out there in body armor with a rifle, and you got a very provoked crowd that could be upset, and it could be a big problem. Yeah. It's forcing us to make some procedures. I haven't published them yet within our community, but there's going to be some policies. And I tell people, I'm not your dad. You can do whatever you want. You just can't really do whatever you want and train here. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So at some point, there has to be boundaries. What I see is a lack of consideration for the other folks. It becomes about the person doing it. Yep. And I've seen, like a lot of times, a person that's got an AR in every gun. There's a guy that just came out to Castle Rock, and he had a shotgun, and it was loaded with all this, stuff on the stock, an AR, a drop leg holster, all this stuff, and he had a sign that says "No looting here." The backstory of that, and I've had guys, hey, are we going to grab guns? We're going to show up, and I'm like, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So the backstory of that, what they don't understand is that I've already been on the phone with police officers, that I respect, and hopefully that's mutual, with the chief of police in Castle Rock, with the state patrol captain there, a friend of mine, and then the sheriff's department. And what they're doing is, unbeknownst to these other people that don't really, haven't looked deep enough, is that they don't want to agitate it. So they're watching it closely. Sometimes there are video cameras that are on their buildings, and sometimes there's teams just a block away that are ready to deal with it, but they don't want to agitate it. Mm-hmm. Then here comes, Joe Citizen that's agitating it. It's like, that's exactly what we tried not to do, so it creates a problem. So now they draw attentions, and this guy's like, I don't know what this guy's motives are. He may start causing problems. So they're watching him and not what they're supposed to be watching. So it just kind of draws away from the capability. And where I'd caution people from a legal perspective is disorderly conduct. It's a catch-all that we see used in a lot of cases by prosecutors when they're charging people with things. Where that could specifically apply is 189-106F. You display a firearm in a manner calculated to alarm in public. And where we see this used a lot is a lot of the anti-gun groups back in the day. You say, well, you walk into a 7-Eleven or a King Soopers, you see somebody open carrying a pistol on their hip, call up the police, say this guy is he's a potential mass shooter, you need to get out here. And they're just doing it to harass open carriers. if you are body armoring up, carrying a rifle onto public at a protest, and you're very clearly on the other side of this protest and doing it to antagonize people, that's a very easy win for a prosecutor if they put that in front of a jury, especially if you're in a not so friendly county. And that's what I would be really worried about, and what I'd encourage people that are thinking I'm going to tool up and go out to one of these protests, be thinking about that. You're handing a pretty easy win to the prosecutor doing that.
What's your thoughts on, so, I've got my thoughts on open carry. I don't do it. I like the fact that, that we can, and I know, I shouldn't say I don't do it. I don't do it daily. If I'm going hunting and I'm loading the car and I'm doing all that stuff, I may have a pistol on my hip. It may be exposed, it may not. Got a concealed handgun permit, so it's okay if it is, it is, covered or something like that. But typically not out shopping and doing all that. In my experience, and this is just my opinion, most people aren't doing it to express their Second Amendment, whatever. It's all about that person. Look at me, I'm the guy with the gun on, and that's where I'm uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I mean, something kind of sticks out in my mind. A couple of years ago, I was going into a bank down in Colorado Springs. I made my truck payment, and as I'm walking out the door, there was a guy that comes in. He's got a shoulder holster. He's got a pistol under each arm. He's got a drop leg holster with another pistol in it. He's wearing a Punisher shirt as he walks into the bank. And of course, I've got a Glock on my hip, and I kind of stopped and turned around and said, is this what's about to happen here? Is this guy going in to make a payment on his truck, or is he about to rob this place? And a lot of times open carry definitely brings up those kind of issues. Living in Colorado Springs, we have a lot more of it than you do up in the metro area for sure.
Is that right?
We see it a lot down there. And my finding is most people don't even notice it. Honestly, I walk through the Lowe's by my house, and every time I do, I see two guys open carrying. I ask my wife, "Hey, did you see the guy with the gun over there?" And she goes, "What? I didn't notice that. I was just looking at the tile." So most people don't notice that, but it can get you into some problems. I believe there's a Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, and the Mothers Demand Action Group. A few years ago, they were putting out on their Twitter pages that if you see somebody with a gun in public, you need to call the police and tell them, "I think this person is going to be a mass shooter," and they're simply doing it to harass gun owners. That doesn't help us. And the pictures from years ago with Open Carry Texas with the guys that 400-pound dude in a Hawaiian shirt carrying an SKS into Chili's. All right. And most of the time they're just posing with the gun inside a store just so they could say they did it. And I know the idea behind that was to, kind of create awareness about open carry and that kind of stuff. We got to be really careful about how we use that.
The one story I tell about, how to be an advocate for, the Second Amendment and legally, conceal carrying a firearm is that I was talking with the news came and we did active shooter training for the church and in the community. We do that right over here next door. But the news was there and they interviewed a lot of people. And then one lady that knew that I was on the security team, but I was also running men's groups and I was doing all this other stuff. And she came up, she said, "What do you think about this, Jimmy? Honestly, is it necessary for all this other stuff?" She's like, "Well, somebody's gonna have an accident. It's just too much. It would be a statement that we don't really need to make." And I go, every time I've talked to you for the past 3 years, I've been legally armed. And I do that to protect you, me, and my children. Really. And it just changed everything. Because then it wasn't like not peacocking and saying, "Look at my gun," or "I'm going to shoot you," or whatever. It's just, you're a pretty nice guy. You're a pretty professional guy, level-headed guy. And you don't need to show the world that you've got a gun and which kind it is and all this other stuff. So I think that is what was really going to help our cause. Responsible people, obviously ready, because the world is telling us, this environment is telling us, hey, there's some stuff going on. I don't know why people are losing their mind. Don't necessarily care once they walk in that door and want to do something bad.
Yep.
But I appreciate the fact that people, are professional, they're considerate of other people, but they're also capable. So hopefully we're hitting the nail on the head on that one. Okay, so let's go to the first one that I've got came from earlier today, and this is Blaine in Castle Rock. He says, "I'd like to hear about use of force in protests to include blocking the roadways and being attacked. The police are having their hands tied with their response, so I think it would be interesting to hear how/if that applies to citizens." We've seen a couple of these lately. There's been some protests that were peaceful that wanted to go block all the streets at the Capitol. We've seen some other things where people have just walked out and blocked, interstates or whatever. What say you about that?
Well, use of force. Use of force, you're allowed to use physical force to protect yourself or another person from the unlawful use of physical force against them. All right. If somebody is simply blocking a roadway, That doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden go up and get confrontational, use force against them. There's an idea of citizen's arrest. And obviously the case in Georgia a few months back involving the two guys that shot somebody that was jogging out there, that's a very bad example of use of a citizen's arrest. In Colorado, a person is allowed to commit a citizen's arrest if they witness a crime being committed in their presence. Colorado doesn't specify the level of the crime. It has to be, you don't have to know whether this is an F1 or an F2 or a third degree misdemeanor. It simply has to be a crime. Understand, though, you're going to be judged on a reasonableness standard. Anything like that goes up in front of a jury, the question is going to be, were you acting reasonably or not? In the politically charged climate that we're in right now, I don't think you're going to find a lot of people, with the 6 or 12 people that are sitting on that jury judging you, who are going to say, hey, this person was out here peacefully protesting and you decide you're going to commit a citizen's arrest for obstructing a highway. Yeah. It's not going to fly. That is, even if you wind up winning that case, you're going to spend a heck of a lot of money in legal bills that you don't want to be spending there. So I would definitely encourage you not to do something like that. Where you need to focus on use of force is in defense, defending yourself, defending others. Use of force is allowed in defense of property. You're allowed to use force to protect your property from being destroyed, from being burglarized, broken into, those sort of things. But you're never allowed to use deadly force. And where a lot of people, get confused, they think, well, my car is an extension of my home as part of the castle doctrine. It's not. That is kind of a principle that is part of it. Make my day does not apply to your home. The only time that you're allowed to use deadly force in defense of property is first-degree arson, which is burning an occupied structure. Anything short of that, you cannot use deadly force to protect your property. Now, you can use force to protect your property. And the example that I like to give on something like this is, I hear a sound in my driveway in the middle of the night. So I go and I grab my short-barreled suppressed AR out of the gun safe. I walk outside and I see that there's a guy trying to steal my truck. I can't shoot him to prevent him from stealing my truck. Okay. But by having that firearm out there, by letting him know that I am armed, I'm using force at that point. I'm actually committing a felony. It's felony menacing, placing somebody in imminent fear of death or serious bodily injury by use of a deadly weapon, because he should be aware that, if you try something here, I may shoot you. So I'm committing a felony, but I'm justified in doing it because I believe at that time that this person is in the process of committing a felony. I know that people who commit felonies tend to be armed, they tend to be unstable, and that there is an imminent threat to me simply by intervening in this, which is why I took a gun out there, which is why I displayed a firearm so that I can show that I'm not simply going to be a rollover kind of victim here. I can't use that gun to protect my car, though. I can only use it to protect myself, to protect my family. So if he gets out of the car with a sharpened screwdriver and charges me, I can use that gun to protect myself. For life. But if he gets my car started and he starts driving away, I can't shoot him as he drives away to prevent him from stealing my truck.
That's interesting what you said, is that I am committing a felony. You're saying this, and this is interesting to me, because when I first heard it, it kind of took me back a little bit. I understand it, though, is that you're saying you are committing a crime. Yeah. Like if you go out there and this guy attacks you, are going to commit a crime, but you're saying it's a justified crime. So if there's a law that says you can't discharge a firearm within city limits and you defend your life, you just broke the law because you discharged it, but you're saying it's justified. It's to save your life.
It's a widely misunderstood thing. A lot of people think that, well, self-defense means that I never committed a crime when I shot somebody, when I displayed a firearm, when I use that force upon another person, and it doesn't, because the crime, the simple explanation I give is, a very simplified definition of murder. Murder is the intentional taking of a human life. So if I shoot somebody that's broken into my home, they have a weapon, they're threatening me, I have murdered that person because I intended to kill them, and I did that. But I have a justification for why I did, either make my day law or the affirmative defense of self-defense. And that steps in and says that even though I committed this crime, I have a justification for why I did it. And a lot of people miss that. And they don't understand that when you start talking about a self-defense situation, especially using a firearm, there's usually a list of a half a dozen crimes that you committed in the process there. But you've got this overriding affirmative defense to it. And if there's a problem with that affirmative defense, if you don't actually justify your actions, you don't get all the way there, those 6 crimes are going to come back and haunt you.
Gotcha. Fantastic. We got a call?
Yes, sir.
All right, brother. Who we got?
So we have Kat from Longmont on.
Kat from Longmont. Kat, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm well.
What's your question for James or myself? Let's see what we can do to get it answered.
Yeah, well, we hear a lot about in Colorado the Make My Day law. Is that a true thing? And what does that really mean?
So, Make My Day Law absolutely is a true thing, and that's actually the name of it. It was originally going to be called Colorado Castle Doctrine or something innocuous like that, and the legislature the opponents of it managed to get it to change it over to memorialize a heroic San Francisco police inspector from the 1970s, and it is a fantastic law. I hate the name of it, but it really is a fantastic law, and it sets out a 4-part test, and the parts of the Make My Day law are, first, you have to be able to explain that you were lawfully in a structure, that you're allowed to be in there, you're allowed to stay the night, it's your house, something like that. Second, the person you use force against has to make an unlawful entry into that dwelling. All right. And an unlawful entry is basically everything that you're thinking of. Somebody broke the window, they crawled in through that, they kicked in the back door, they walked up to the door and said that they're from Comcast, and then, shoved their way in as soon as you get in there. They have to make that unlawful entry. And third, you have to believe that they are breaking in with the intent to commit a crime inside. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that's where it ends. They think that the Make My Day law it's a burglar offense law. If somebody breaks into your dwelling, that you're allowed to shoot them dead, no questions asked. And that's not the case. There's a 4th part of the Make My Day law, still a self-defense law. You have to be in imminent fear of bodily injury. Unlawful force being used against you. Unlawful force is basically any sort of physical contact. That's, some guy is going to rush past me and he's going to hit me in the shoulder like he's a running back. He sees me standing there and he's going to shove me to the ground. I don't know if he's going to punch me or I don't know what he's going to do, but he's using some sort of force against me, or he's going to go grab my daughter. He's going to hit my wife. He's going to do something like that. When you reach that point, the Make My Day law says that you are allowed to use whatever degree of force you believe is necessary, up to and including deadly force. Mm-hmm. So it simplifies the standard a little bit. It makes it easier for a homeowner to say, I believe that I was in danger of having this guy assault me. I don't know exactly how bad it's going to be. I don't necessarily think that he was about to kill me, but I know that he was about to assault me or my wife or my child, and I used force to protect myself. Where we see a lot of people get this wrong is that they hear the noise in the night. They walk downstairs into the living room. They see the burglar trying to get the flat screen TV off their wall, and they think, well, I can just shoot this guy in the back. You still have to establish that there was some kind of threat against you. And simply because somebody is broken in does not mean you're going to get there.
So the 4 parts for Kat. So the first part was that you can be there, right? You have authority to be there, or authorization to be there at your home. Yep. It's something, doesn't have to be your home though, right?
It doesn't have to be.
Okay.
It can be somebody else's home. It has to be a dwelling. A dwelling
okay.
is defined as typically someplace that people sleep, that they habitate overnight. So it applies to hotel rooms, motel rooms, houses. The question always comes up like an RV. And I hate to say there just hasn't been a case yet in Colorado where somebody has shot somebody in their RV, claimed the Make My Day law, and it went in front of a judge to decide if the Make My Day law extends to RVs. And I've heard enough of these cases that I'm pretty sure right now, if you do shoot somebody in your RV, call me up on the case. I'm pretty sure I'm going to win it. It just hasn't happened yet.
Right. So that was the first one. Mm-hmm. The second one is that they're not supposed to be there. So they're in there, they broke the law to get in there.
Yep.
The third one was?
Third one is you have to believe they're there to commit a crime inside.
Okay. So to commit a crime. And then the fourth one, that you were in danger.
Yeah. You or somebody else is in danger. And again, the standard for I'm going to use deadly force to protect myself out on the street is I have to believe that myself or somebody else is in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Inside my home, it's lowered to I just believe somebody's going to use unlawful force against me. So it's a lower standard there. And it's not really just to make it so easy to shoot somebody inside your home. It's because when you are inside your home, you've got no place to retreat. You're there in your castle, somebody's broken in, and the legislature said, okay, we're going to make this a little bit easier for somebody to justify their actions. But you still have to be able to establish all of that.
It is such a big deal, and I love the fact that Colorado has that law because you do have the right to feel safe in your home or defend your family, like as a father or as a husband and all that stuff. Some states don't have that, and that's bad news. Kat, does that answer your question?
It sure does. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Do you have another one, or is that the other one you had?
Nope, that's all I had today.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks. Bye. Anybody else on the line, or go to the next one to read it? Okay. So let's see. We got Jason from Missoula, Montana. He says, given the nature of controlled environmental training, he puts entries. So entries type training that produces targeted outcomes. Is there specific targeted training in the legal context that results from protecting our families at home or our community at churches and schools, etc. When law enforcement shows up, can we train for the interactions with police officers given different circumstances? I believe what he's asking is, as we're doing this training and all that stuff, is like, and I don't know, and this is a question for you. We do some deconfliction training that basically the way we say it is, the onus is on us. If I'm in there as a volunteer or a homeowner or whatever, and I've called the police and they're on their way, the onus, if I'm standing there and I just shot a guy, horrible thing. I had to defend my life, neutralize the threat, and I'm standing there. The onus is now on me to not get shot. It's not on them to not shoot me. I need to take some precautions to not look like an active shooter. I may be holster. and I've had people say, put the gun down. Man, I think the holster, and then get the holster away from so the officer doesn't even see that. Because I've trained police officers for years and years and years, and I've just seen they're human beings too. They see gun, their finger bends, and you get shot, that kind of thing, We do a lot of reality-based training. So if we do something like that, how does the law look at that? You defended your life, you were the good guy. Obviously here in this state, we've had some situations where we believe that the person was doing the right thing or the thing that he thought, and then there was just, a miscommunication. They thought that he was the other guy, and then they end up getting shot.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing. We had a really tragic case in Aurora, I believe it was last year, with a very heroic grandfather that lost his life when the officers arrived. And that's what I tell my, all the people in my classes is exactly what she said. Best place you can put that gun, reholster it, because you can keep your hands up in the air, but you're not going to lose control over that firearm. I think I saw a civilian self-defense shooting a few years ago that took place in public, and the guy immediately after it was done just dropped the gun on the ground and walked away. And that's the last thing you want to do, because you don't know who else is in that house. You don't know who else is there at that scene. Somebody may pick that up thinking, great, now I get a free gun. Somebody else might pick that up thinking, hey, I'm going to avenge this person you just shot. So you want to hold control over that. As far as my advice is, if you don't have something like a holster, don't lose control of the gun. All right. Don't go put it back into your gun safe. Don't go, drop it on the floor, set it on a table, take a couple of steps away, have those hands up, something like that. I think is really, really good advice on that. And, kind of to that point, I've heard people say, well, I'm going to take my, if I ever shoot somebody in self-defense, I'm going to go take my gun. I'm going to go put it back in my gun safe, because I don't want I don't want to lose it. When the police get there and they take it, I will dissuade you of that right now. You're going to get your gun taken away. You're probably going to get all the guns in your house taken away. You're going to get all of your ammo and your magazines taken away too. That's just what they're going to do. Yeah. Kind of a example of that. I had a client many years ago who was he was a soldier down at Fort Carson, and he was watching the movie Black Hawk Down in the middle of the night, and had a little bit to drink and had negligent discharge through his roof with an AR-15. The sheriff's department came in there, and he said, that's the rifle I did it with. Here's, the hole in the ceiling where I did it. You can see the spent casing there on the ground. And they said, great, we're going to take every gun in the house. And the reason they did is because they said that we can't identify positively that was the gun that did it. And then, of course, my response is, you can probably tell it wasn't a 12 gauge shotgun, but they took a shotgun anyway, because they said, until we can get the ballistics lab to confirm that this was the gun that did it, we're simply going to take everything. Now, why are they doing that? It's because they want to get all the guns off the scene, but that's what their legal excuse is going to be. So you're going to lose everything anyway when that happens.
Gotcha. As far as we just talked about this before we started, is we were talking about the reason you could shoot, and the way that I just kind of bounce this off of, I do it regularly, is what we tell people. We had an article written about this when I just did it at a seminar, because they were saying it's a fantastic way to just get people to wrap their head around it. Because I jokingly say, you're going to get a packet from the sheriff's department whenever you get your concealed handgun permit. And, it's going to show you a lot of these laws are spelled out for, at least in Douglas County. You get a bunch of these laws shown out. I go, carry that with you. And if somebody attacks you, pull it out, flip through it, and then everybody starts laughing, right? And I'm like, obviously you're not going to do that, right? So I go, you need to understand, you need to answer this question in half a second. What would happen if you didn't pull the trigger? If I didn't pull the trigger, I would die. Pretty good answer, right? Defend your life, pull the trigger. My wife would die, pull the trigger. They would take my daughter, I'd never see her again, pull the trigger. Some kind of sexual assault thing, pull the trigger. He's stealing my TV, like you said. That's a different deal. Now you're not defending yourself, you're defending your stuff. So you cross that line, but you need to process that question very quickly, quite frankly, before it ever happens, so you know that. Yep. And then we talked about, well, how many times do you shoot? And I love in classes when I say, how many times do you shoot? And people go, 7 or 3 or 4. I'm like, explain that, please. And they have some weird answer. And then you said the exact same term we use, threat stop. We call it threat stop. You're going to shoot till the threat stops. That threat that was going to kill you, and I say, guys run at you with a hatchet, you better shoot until he stops running at you with a hatchet. The threat is stopped. We're not trying to kill anybody ever. We're trying to neutralize a threat. And once you do it, Finger comes out of the trigger, reassess, better your position, and look for other threats. Get your family together, get your kids together, have them touch you, link to you, and get out of the way. So that was reaffirming to hear that we're on the same page with that I'm the same page with the guy that's probably going to be talking if that ever happens.
Yeah, absolutely. What I always tell my clients is that the only reason you are shooting that person, you're pulling that trigger, is to stop an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. That's what you need to be focused on there. And the question, how many times do I shoot? You shoot until the threat is stopped. If that person still has a weapon, if that person's still in a position where they can put you in that kind of harm, then you need to keep shooting until that threat is over with. If they drop their weapon, if they turn their back, they're running away, they're getting out of that position, they're no longer a threat. You're not shooting anymore. But that's kind of one of those things where language can really hurt you. If somebody says, well, I shot him 3 times, I did a Mozambique drill because I wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Yeah.
Well, I understand the thought process behind that. You don't want this person to be a threat anymore. But when you say, I'm ensuring this guy is dead, you've basically just said, I made sure that I killed him, and it may or may not have been justified. That first shot may have been justified. What about that last 2? What about that one to the head? It gets to be very, very troublesome. It
does, and I think it paints a bigger picture. I talk about in our classes is that, that there's a line there, and we always want to be the good guys. Well, that means you don't cross that line. That means that, you have to ask that question again. Guy lays you shoot, he falls down, drops his gun, he's laying there moaning, and then, you look around and then you shoot again. You need to ask your question again. What would happen if I didn't pull the trigger? Nothing would happen. He's laying there saying, please don't shoot me. Yeah. Well, he attacked me. He attacked you 5 seconds ago. Right now, he's defenseless, and you shot again. That's what put you in jail. So that's the thing that people, to be on the right side, to be the good guys, and to try to do it right, then you need to assess that constantly and just make sure that you're not crossing that line. We got another caller, sir?
Sure, I have Melissa from Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, okay. Melissa, how you doing?
Hey, how are you guys?
We're good, thank you. What is your question, ma'am?
So I have my concealed carry permit, and I want a little bit more information about what my legal right is to actually carry in my vehicle. Does it have to be on me? Can it be in my glove compartment? Does it need to be in a lockbox? What is my right? Do I need to even have a concealed carry permit to have it in my car? What can you tell me about how that process works?
Yeah, Colorado is a great state as far as it goes for carrying a vehicle. We've taken some backslides since 2013 as far as our gun laws go. But in Colorado, we actually have a specific statute that says that you are allowed to carry a firearm in your vehicle for your protection while traveling. Period. End of story. It doesn't state what method it has to be. That has to be unloaded. It has to be locked up. Anything like that. And it doesn't state what kind of firearm it has to be. Now we have another statute. It actually comes from the Fish and Game statutes, which says that you are not allowed to have a long gun, rifle, or shotgun with a loaded chamber. Colorado defines a loaded chamber as you've got a round in the chamber and the bolt is closed. In Colorado, if you've got the AR-15 open with the bolt locked back and a magazine in place and you just have to hit that bolt release, that's technically an unloaded firearm. So pistols, revolvers, you can carry them anywhere inside your vehicle and you don't have to have a concealed carry permit for it. Rifles and shotguns, they do have to be unloaded, but again, you can carry them anywhere inside your vehicle. They can be concealed or unconcealed inside the car.
Does that answer your question? I had a question that piggybacks off Melissa's. I'm sorry, excuse me. Post office, federal buildings, and all that kind of stuff. Because I've heard this, and I just want to confirm this.
Yeah,
it is in my car. Same thing apply?
Yeah, it doesn't. And that's a really, really touchy subject because essentially post offices are federal property. As long as the post office actually owns that parking lot, it's a freestanding structure, not just a slot in the strip mall between the closed down Blockbuster Video and the Starbucks, then that is federal property and the federal government doesn't recognize your concealed carry permit. So technically, yes, it is illegal even if you have that gun, if you have a concealed carry permit to have that gun inside your vehicle in the post office. Now, the question always comes up, well, wasn't there that case, a few years ago where they overruled something like that? And that was a very specific case involving a post office that somebody had to make a 30-mile round trip in order to go to. And they basically argued I shouldn't have to go home, drop my gun off, go back to the post office, go back home, pick my gun up, and then go back and do the rest of my rest of my rounds. Unfortunately, that also got reversed at a higher level as well. So that case no longer holds any kind of precedent. So yes, post offices, you cannot have a gun in them, even if you have a concealed carry permit and even if it's inside your vehicle, just like military bases.
So to be legal, I would have to park off the property, my vehicle, walk onto the property, do my post office stuff, and then go back to my car.
Yep. And as far as I tell people, yes, you need to be legal. That's exactly what you have to do. If God forbid you were to go to the post office and forgot that you had your concealed firearm in the car, just remember, if somebody ever asks you if they can search your vehicle, the reason they're doing it is because they are trying to charge you with something. They're trying to find evidence of a crime, and you can always refuse to allow somebody to search your vehicle.
Melissa, does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Do you have another one, or is that the one you had?
What about, is there, I think you had talked about long barrels. What about carrying ARs in my car? Is that, do I need, can I do that without a concealed carry?
Yeah, you can. An AR is going to be considered just like any other rifle. It's legally a rifle. Now with ARs, there is kind of a weird little gray ground we get into here, is AR pistols. It used to be that it was an AR-15 with a short barrel and no buttstock on. Now we've got the pistol braces that are 95% of a buttstock, but they're technically a brace. An AR pistol is still a pistol. And it's also important to note that your concealed carry permit, Colorado does not have a concealed weapons permit. We have a concealed handgun permit. A handgun is a pistol or a revolver. So if you have got a AR-15, even if you've got a short, federally registered 8-inch 300 blackout with a small collapsing buttstock on it, that is a rifle. You cannot put that in your backpack and go, walk into King Soopers and go about shopping for groceries because you've got a concealed rifle. That's not covered by your permit. However, if you've got an AR-15 pistol, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend that people go and do this, but if that is legally a pistol, yeah, you can throw that in a pack and you can go about your daily business with it because that is a handgun.
That's a big deal with the by your definition that what's sitting next to you in the car in the back seat or whatever, if there is a round in the chamber and it's an AR pistol, you're okay. If it's in a rifle, then you're not. So that's, I know some church security teams and some other security type services that aren't, law enforcement by definition, having those things. One guy might have an SBR, one guy has a pistol. We have most of our people, when we recommend firearms, we don't recommend a lot. We just say, hey, I'm shooting this and it works well for me, and people end up buying it. Is start with a pistol because you can make it whatever you want. You can make it longer, shorter, whatever. That doesn't apply if you buy a rifle.
Correct.
So legal if that's a rifle and you go shorten it up and you're like, oh, it looks like yours now. I'm like, except it's a felony, whatever.
Yep.
So it's
Yep.
like
you can always go pistol to rifle. You can't go rifle to pistol.
Right. Does that answer your question, Melissa?
I do have one more.
Please.
So it's kind of on the other side. So I don't normally get pulled over, but if I do get pulled over for speeding, do I have to legally let the officer know, I'm carrying a gun? Do I need to let them know that I'm I have a concealed carry permit? Is that something I need to disclose to the officer when I'm getting pulled over for speeding or doing something wrong that's against the law?
Yeah,
what's my right of that?
That is a great question because I've got a lead foot and a Hemi, so I'm pretty familiar with this. In Colorado, there is no requirement that you have to inform law enforcement that you either have a concealed carry permit or you have a firearm in the vehicle when you are stopped. However, what a lot of people get kind of question about is, well, don't they know automatically when they pull up behind me and run my license plate? Well, no. The way that our concealed carry permit system, it was back in, I believe it was 2001, we unitized our state concealed carry laws, and that way you couldn't have one set of laws that applied in Denver, another set that applied in Boulder, and then a third set that applied down in Colorado Springs. And when they unitized it, there was a statewide database of every person that had a concealed carry permit. It was run through the NCIC system. So when somebody ran your license plate, it would get flagged and it would say this person, I've had the law enforcement officer tell me it would come back as, I believe it was a code 1, which meant that you're either a registered sex offender or you had a concealed carry permit.
It's like, wow. It's like,
yeah. So that law expired in 2011 sunset. So there's no longer a state database. So what that means is that each county sheriff has a list of every person who has a concealed carry permit in their county. So if you're pulled over by a county sheriff, there's a good chance that they're going to be notified as soon as you get pulled over that this person has a concealed carry permit. So in my case, I live down in El Paso. If I get stopped by the El Paso County Sheriff's Department, I'm pretty sure they're going to know that I've got a concealed carry permit when they come over to my car. If I get stopped in Teller County, they're not going to know that I have a concealed carry permit. If I get stopped by the state patrol, they're not going to know that I have a concealed carry permit. And that's going to apply in your county as well. So if you're stopped by a municipal police department in there, 99% chance they're not going to know. Now, there are some jurisdictions that share that information. Denver police versus, Denver sheriff. I'm sure they're going to be on the same system. City of Boulder and Boulder County, I've been told that they're on the same system as well. But if you're out of county, they're not going to necessarily know. So the question becomes, should you let the officer know that I've got a gun in the car, that I've got my concealed carry permit? I'm going to give you my opinion on this, and it's very situational. All right. And you need to be cognizant of where you are and who you're getting pulled over by. If I'm getting pulled over in, Metro Denver, that's a traditionally pretty gun unfriendly jurisdiction versus if I'm getting pulled over in Walsenburg. All right. That's a pretty gun friendly jurisdiction. Kind of keep those political things in mind. And more importantly, the officer. If you have got the 24-year-old officer that still looks wet behind the ears and you're wondering how the heck is this guy old enough to be a cop, he's much more likely to, kind of get really concerned and maybe overreact than if you've got the 55-year-old officer that's got the huge mustache that obviously shows power and experience in law enforcement. He's not going to freak out if you say, officer, I've got a gun in the car. That young officer may say, okay, I'm going to disarm you, get out of the vehicle. I'm going to take your gun. He's going to take it back to his car. You're going to get back a bag of Glock. So that's really the worst thing that can happen to you. In the grand scheme of things, is that terrible to happen to you? No, it's a pain in the butt. It's an annoyance, but it's not going to affect you too badly there. So be cognizant of that, and also be cognizant of whether this gun is going to come into play during that stop. If I've got my, my nice 5-inch 1911 and an outside the waistband holster on my right hip, and I'm not wearing a coat over it, I'm pretty sure that's going to come into play. That officer is going to see it. And even if I don't think that officer on my left side is going to see it, his partner that got out of the car 6 seconds behind him and then walked up on me on the right side surely is. So if it's going to come into play, you definitely need to explain that you got it there. If you have a concealed carry permit, I would absolutely lead with that and say, hey, officer, here's my information. You know what they're going to ask you for. It's going to be, driver's license, insurance, proof of registration. Throw the concealed carry permit in the stack there and say, and officer, I just want to let you know that I've got a pistol on my right hip here. 9 out of 10 times they're simply going to say, okay, you don't touch yours, I'm not going to touch mine, and everything's going to be cool.
Yeah. That answer your question, Melissa?
That does. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah, I've done it and I've not done it. So I've done both, but yeah, traditionally I get pulled over. It is window down, 10 and 2, car off, dome light on. I don't envy the fact that you have to walk up on a vehicle from behind from somebody that just broke the law. You know what I mean? Because it's like most of the time, Castle Rock, they do it all day, every day. You said all that stuff, but it's just such a bad situation. You're showing up on defense and you have no idea what's in that car. Some of these cars with tinted windows, you have no idea what's inches away from your body and all that kind of stuff. So I just appreciate those guys and do that. I have not said it, and I have said, why didn't you say that? And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just didn't say it because it was a seatbelt thing, and I thought it'd just be like, hey, just keep down, whatever. And then he goes, you have any weapons in the vehicle? After he came back, so I'm sure it was shared information. Said, yeah, right hip, legally carrying, concealed, and he goes, any reason you didn't tell me that? I go, because it's not the law. And then we got in a conversation, and I didn't mean to be a jerk about it. I just didn't really think it was pertinent, whatever. And then we just started talking after that. He goes, yeah, it's a good idea to do that. So, okay, understand that, and get some buddies or cops and whatever. And anyways, that kind of is a respect thing. It is good. I know if I was a police officer, I'd probably want to hear it. Especially at night, especially all these other factors, 10 and 2. Well, I see his hands, the lights are on. He even turned the car off. He ain't bolting. Probably one of the good guys. Who knows, but probably one of the good guys. Another call?
Yeah, I've got Jeff from Castle Pines.
Jeff from Castle Pines. How are you, Jeff? Can you hear me?
Yeah, Jimmy, thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you and the attorney, if I may. I know legal standards for the justifiable use of lethal force are different, whether you're inside the home or outside the home. I'd like to hear some discussion of the details of those differences, and also for this context, what is the definition of home?
Yeah. So it kind of breaks down between what we call the affirmative defense of self-defense and the make my day law. And we talked about the make my day law a few minutes ago here, and just kind of refresh on that. That is, it's your dwelling or a dwelling you're legally allowed to be in. That's kind of, I think, where you're getting at with a home there. The person has broken in there. They're not allowed to be inside and they've made an unlawful entry. You believe the person did it with the intent to commit a crime inside. And the important part on this, the standard for when you can use the force is you are in imminent danger of unlawful force being used against you or somebody else. So that standard is going to differ wildly from the affirmative defense, which is everywhere at all times. But to get back to your question, what is the home? Typically, the word that is used in the law is a dwelling, and a dwelling is typically someplace that you sleep. And the example that I like to use to get people is, if you're trying to figure out if some part of your home is going to be considered part of your dwelling, can you get to your bedroom without going back outside? I've got a attached garage. If I confront an intruder in my attached garage, I'm going to be covered under make my day because I can get from my attached garage to my bedroom without going back outside. My shed in the backyard, I have to cross the backyard. That's not going to be considered part of my dwelling. We had a case in Manitou Springs about 2 years ago involving an individual who confronted a crazy homeless guy who had picked up a screwdriver and was threatening him with it in the garage. And this actually went to a make my day hearing where a judge was forced to decide, does the make my day law apply in this case or not? And ultimately the judge ruled, no, make my day law does not apply in this case because that detached garage is not a contiguous part of the dwelling there. And ultimately the guy went to trial and he won because the jury said that his actions were reasonable at the time. But that's an important thing to understand too when we talk about the make my day law. Just because you don't meet all the standards for make my day does not mean that you can't defend yourself anymore. It just means you're going to be under the affirmative defense standard. So what is the affirmative defense standard? An affirmative defense is basically, I admit that I committed a crime, but I had a legal justification for why I did it. So when we're talking about self-defense, it is, I committed a murder, I committed a menacing, I committed an assault, but I had a legal justification for why I did it. And in Colorado, it's really a two-part test. First, you have to be able to explain why you believe that you or somebody else was in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Imminent means that you're facing a threat right now. They have the means, the motive, and the opportunity to cause that harm to you. And the level of threat that you're facing is death or serious bodily injury. Death is fairly self-explanatory. Serious bodily injury is any kind of injury that could lead to death, anything that causes broken bones, loss of limb function, or any injury that is caused with a deadly weapon. So if the person has a gun, has a knife, it's a very easy calculation. If they don't have any sort of weapon, you have to be able to explain why you thought if this guy, jumps up on top of me, MMA style, ground and pounding me, that I'm going to suffer a serious bodily injury for it. So that's the first part. You have to be in imminent danger. And the second part, you have to be able to explain why you didn't believe that a lesser degree of force would be adequate to stop the threat that you're facing. I like to put it another way. You didn't think you had a better option. Most common better option we're going to have is simply to flee, to disengage, to get out of that situation, to extricate ourselves from it. But there's going to be times when we can't do that. You're in a room with one entrance there, and there's no way you can get out of this situation. This person is, he's grabbing my 6-year-old daughter, and I've got to intervene now to keep her from causing some kind of injury to her. There's going to be times when we can't use a lesser degree of force, and those are the times when you're allowed to use deadly force to defend yourself or somebody else.
Fantastic. Does that answer your question, Jeff?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening.
Too.
I've heard it said this way, and I kind of want to bounce this off you, is the one thing to think about, heading into a situation, and this is mostly for law enforcement and TAC teams and all that kind of stuff, is that they're going to take, meaning the law, that the courts are going to take basically three looks, if you will. They're going to look at you, they're going to look at the other person, they're going to look at the situation. So you, meaning Navy SEAL guy, teaches this stuff for a living, could kill him with his pinky, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to have a pretty hard time, right? Maybe. The other guy, didn't have the right opportunities and he was forced into a life of crime and thought he would stab me, whatever. And then the situation, was at noon in Castle Rock? Was at 3:00 in the morning on 16th Street Mall? Like all of those things factor in. Is that kind of adequate at a snapshot? Because I know legally it's much harder. It just gets confusing. Is that a way to kind of look at it? Meaning, does my wife, not even my wife, because my wife's kind of a, she's Spitfire. But if you, somebody that says, I got a big guy, like Pete bearing down on a, little lady like this, at some point, I'm going to tell that lady, if I'm training her, you need to start pulling the trigger right now. And that's just realistic. Why? Because now I'm looking at you, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at this situation. In a minute, he's going to have your gun, and now it's too late. What say you?
So what I say is ultimately every case comes down to the jury. All right, whether it goes to a jury or not, the first and foremost thing, I was a prosecutor before I became a defense attorney. I spent 3 years down at the district attorney's office, so I've seen it from both ends there. And from the very onset of a case, when you're an attorney handling a criminal case, you've got to think, what is this jury going to think about this? What can I prove to the jury? What can I show? What kind of story can I tell here? And if you're talking about, somebody, an ex-Navy SEAL is super trained and very competent in firearms, that can absolutely have an effect on the case. If you're talking about the situation of guys broken into my house, okay, and I confront him in my living room and he's on the other side of the living room, there's a good gap between us there. He's trying to get the TV off the wall and I yell, hey, get out of here, stop stealing my TV or something like that. And he turns and takes a step towards me. All right. I've got a lot more firearms experience than my wife. And if I walk down there and, I've got my ninja looking, AR-15 down there and I say simply, he turned and he looked at me, so I shot him dead. That's not going to go well for me because that jury, that prosecutor is going to, say to that jury, he should have waited. He has the training, he has the skills, he has the mindset, he had the equipment there to wait a second to see, was this guy actually coming towards him or was he going through the back door that he came out of? If it's my wife, who is not in that same kind of situation, she doesn't have that kind of training, she doesn't have that kind of experience, she's going to say he turned and he looked at me and I thought that he was coming for me. And I knew that if this guy charged me, I wasn't going to be able to hit him. If he's a moving target, I just wasn't confident. So I had to take a decisive action at that point. That's going to play a lot better with the jury.
Sure.
And the question of what about the guy? Ultimately, something that I see this a lot with my clients. They say, well, this guy that, that's the alleged victim in this case, he was a total scumbag. And what I will tell you is people from the district attorney's office are trained to win cases. And if they looked at the caliber of the person that is their alleged victim in the case, they would not take a lot of cases. All right. So they're basically have got this mindset that, the person that you did something to really doesn't matter. All right. It's the act that you did. And from a legal perspective, that's true because you could be the absolute worst person in the world. That doesn't mean that I have the right to go up and assault you. That's right. So don't get, too hung up on the, well, this other guy is a, 15-time convicted felon or something like that. Sure. It's not going to have any lead up towards the case. I will tell you, probably the most common case that we see is, as far as use of firearm, is menacing, and usually is almost always road rage. And one of the interesting things that comes out about road rage is I've gone to trial on a number of these road rage cases, and it turns out they get their victim up on the stand who claims that I was delivering a boatload of cookies to a local orphanage or something right. like that. And they've already got a conviction for felony menacing because they did this exact same thing to somebody other than my client 2 years ago. That sort of thing happens. But ultimately, really, what you have to understand is that every attorney, when you get to the end of that case and you're putting this in front of a jury, we are telling a story. We're taking the facts. We're kind of shaping it in our own way. We're spinning it. We're making one person look better than the other up there. And what it comes down to is what can we make those facts say? So things like, who you are, your experience, who they are, they're all going to be parts of that story. But just having one good fact in that story is not going to change if the rest of them don't look good for you.
No, that's good. I mean, we would teach soldiers this, it's like it changes. They're like, well, that guy was unarmed. And it's like, okay, he's running. 3 guys are running at you. Yes, you're a Navy SEAL. Yes, you're this and that. You just got in a firefight. What we know about you is that you're not 100%, and you need to be honest because guys will be macho and think that, but I'm trained and I'm going to wait and I'm going to do this and do that. And you got 2 holes in your chest and you lost the use of your left arm. You're not 100%. And if you don't pull the trigger now, you won't get a chance later. All of the stuff goes into that story. Yep. So what, you and your status on that particular day and that particular second, all you know is like 2 mean looking dudes running at you and they're not coming to do anything good. And then the situation, you're in the middle of whatever, Afghanistan, or you're in the middle of whatever, and then this is bearing down. That story, you want to be around to tell that story. So that those pieces are very true. Yep. This isn't your best day, and this isn't the thing, and you're not going to be around in a minute. if you don't take an action right now. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I've got so many more questions, so do you mind hanging for just a little bit longer? We're going to go ahead and wrap it up and then go into a second segment. So we'll bring that into next week. But for this week, we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up. I want to special thanks to James Cook, criminal defense attorney. He's going to hang out, be with us for our next segment. But we've got questions that are talking about riots and arson and out of state, how it affects in different states and church security teams and much, much more. So we're going to come back and finish that up in segment 2. So I just want to do a closeout and give us, please ask you to give us a 5-star rating right now, write a review. If you're listening to these right now, know that you can watch them by going on to the protectorculture.com and clicking on the YouTube link. And we've got a segment of several of those. I think this is the 20-something episode. They're all fantastic. And we start a little bit later in the video. So all of them are on audio. Not all of them are video. Check us out on Facebook at Able Shepherd. Check out our Able Shepherd training program at ableshepherd.com. That's ABLESHEPHERD.com. And until next time, God bless each and every one of you. Take care of one another.